The Fearless Podcast, in a time of deceit, telling the truth, is a revolutionary act. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Fearless Podcast. This is a bonus episode. We're excited to have Billy from the Permaculture Pivot today. How you doing, Billy?
I'm doing good, bro. It's so good to be on with you and Matt. And it's, man, every time I see him, man, it looks like he's good night, man. It's like he's getting stronger and I'm getting weaker, man. You still pumping that iron?
You and me both.
A little bit. I had a accident with a fishing hook, travel hook. So it's put me out for about a week now of
That's
training.
all right.
So,
Maybe me and your dad will catch up maybe a little bit. So yeah, I saw him the last time I saw you guys, I was like, man, it's hard to get a real feel for the bottom about people until you see him in person. And I'm like, that kid's as hard as 3 times 9. So you're doing good things. And it's a pleasure to be on with you guys.
yeah, definitely.
Well, you know, a little while back, a couple episodes ago, we did an episode on the red heifer, and we talked a little bit like eschatology and different things. And I know me and you have talked about this in the past. And so I thought we could talk about, there's a lot of stuff going on in the Middle East. A lot of it is largely predicated upon falsehoods. And then there's an inordinate amount of governmental activities, and there's so much duplicity in all of it, and there's so much double think that I thought it'd be great to have you on and kind of talk about this. So we did this red heifer episode, and in the episode, and I got some heat for it, I said the red heifer could be a problem, right? And I got like 3 or 4 responses. No, it will be a problem and all stuff. And I'm like, well, my point is if it actually happens, because supposedly the permit was drawn for the 22nd, which was this past Monday, and it was a nothing burger. It's been a nothing burger in the past. So when you consider that, and then you consider talking points that the October 7th attack was in part because this permit was pulled. And then, so that supposedly was one of the things that started that. But then when this thing doesn't happen on the 22nd, and then, you know, Israel attacks the Iranian embassy, right? So then Iran retaliates, but before retaliating, they say, hey, we're going to retaliate. And then when they retaliate, there are no casualties and the Iron Dome actually works.
No way.
And so what we're watching is political theater.
I'm not the only one that thinks that. I mean, I think this is what you just described there, and I think I heard you say it better than anybody so far. What I heard you, well, let me back up first. Up until recently, I thought only red heifers I knew about were Kathy Griffin. So, and some of the ladies on The View that have red hair. So outside of that, thanks for squaring me away. But all joking aside, this thing is one giant parlor game. And what you just said right there, let me tell you this. When have you ever seen a boxing match or an MMA match or even a wrestling match where the guy says, hey, I'm gonna shoot for your legs here in a little bit? And you know, unless it's pro wrestling, we're really not aware of what your adversary is going to do. So when I saw all that, I'll be honest with you, TD, Matt, I really thought, okay, maybe I can take a little breather here because this is simply a rope-a-dope. This is a giant parlor game for everybody out there. Now, that isn't to say that, you know, that the whatever calamity, whatever crisis, whatever conflagration that they put together, I'm not saying that that's not going to happen. I'm just saying, and I'm wondering if all of this, based on what you said right there, was one massive rope-a-dope. Now, when it comes to this red heifer, I don't think we're done with it yet. I really don't think that we've hit the bottom of it. And for those of you that haven't listened, please go check out TD's episode on his Fearless podcast, where he discusses the red heifer. Probably the best analysis I've heard yet. And I listened to it twice. In fact, I told him that right before I got on there. So I'm not saying, hey, let your guard down, but I'm saying, man, I'm smelling a giant pile of cow manure in this whole thing right now. And I'm starting to up and, you know, I'm glad we're friends, bro, because right now I would think I was pretty doggone alone in the world.
We are on the island of misfit toys. So there you go.
We have been in that program. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I reached out to you, it was in response to a Twitter post by, let's see who, David Wolf. He's the guy that, Element, you know, he's a personal trainer and he developed the product Element and all those different things. And he posed this question about Donald Trump. And I thought it was so relevant to the current state of affairs in the Middle East, you know, with all of this, and why I think it's really pertinent to me as a Christian is so much of this stuff gets twisted into supposed Christianity and eschatology. And so this stuff gets excused away on supposedly biblical accounts. And as a Christian that rightly divides the word of truth, you know, we should be able to give an answer to this stuff. And the answer should never to be kill innocent people. And when you watch the response from the other side of the Zionist nation state, the UN machination, and then you compare that with scripture, you know, I've been binge reading the Old Testament just to try to wrap my head around this. And what I keep coming back to is God said, I'm going to give you the land, right? If you do this, if you do this, if you do these things, I'm going to give you the land. And if you're obeying me, go in and take it and drive out your enemy, right? So they go in, they take it. They don't drive out all their enemies. So they never drove out all their enemies, right? Then they turned from God, disobeyed God, cursed God, shook their fist at God. God said, I'm going to divorce you and I'm going to cut you off. Well, we read that in the New Testament. Cut them off. Blindness in part has happened to Israel. All the apostles save Luke. I'm sorry. All the apostles are Jewish. One of the recorders of the New Testament, Luke, was a Greek, but in a very large part, in a large way, the majority of Jerusalem church was Jewish. So we have a restoration of Jews through the Jerusalem church. And so, but we do not have any type of repentance from the Jewish people, the genetically, you know, from a pedigree standpoint. So without any type of repentance or turning to God, supposedly, according to this 1948 narrative, the nation of Israel was restored. Now, prior to that, you have C.I. Scofield's notes and Bible. You have the pre-tribulational rapture, which was from the Church of the Brethren, which have
Plymouth Brethren.
Yeah, Plymouth Brethren. And it's not, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Starts with a D, his last name, the guy that introduced that whole thing and pushed it heavy. And then Scofield picked it up in his notes. And that's what kind of just made it permeate the Western world. And all of this duplicity surrounding Israel, the nation of Israel, Jewish people, and who are the Jews, and all these different things, they're all predicated exclusively upon dispensationalism and upon this pre-trib notion and about the Jews, the Great Tribulation and the 7-year Great Tribulation, which none of the Great Tribulation doesn't appear in Scripture. The 7-year tribulation doesn't appear in scripture. You know, people twist stuff from Daniel and the time of Jacob's trouble, and they put this 2000 plus year gap. And now this gap used to be, see, when I was growing up, I was raised pre-trib and all that stuff.
Me too.
When I was growing up, it was a 2000 year gap. Well, it's 2024 now. So now we're getting into this like 2020 some year gap. And there was all this stuff too, like a day is 1,000 years. So there's probably, you know, so many years left before this, even though no man knows the day or the hour and all these different things. So there's all this speculation. And now we have this 1948 event that's somehow tied to like Ezekiel and the dead bones and, you know, the nations being restored. But somehow, okay. And then we have the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Schiffs, the Warburgs. We have all these God-hating, atheistic, Zionist people that make this happen. Okay, so they make this whole Jewish nation state happen. The same guys were actually involved in Germany before all that to kind of create the event that would make all that happen. And so fast forward, now we have this nation state, and I will bless them that bless thee, and, you know, persecute them that persecute thee. And there's all this stuff taken out of Congress, out of context. And then you have Congress critters that are like, have debauched personal lives, but they're like, you know, these, I can't forget that one Republican woman's name, and we stand with Israel and all this stuff. And she's like whoring herself out at some movie or play with some ultra lib donor.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a dog and pony show, you know? So we have all this Israel Zionism stuff. That's a dog and pony show. And then we have stateside, we have like Donald Trump coming out with a Bible that has the Constitution in it, right? And he is pimping this thing, and it
Like actually a Bible. Actually a Bible.
a Bible with the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence in it.
Nice.
And then Donald Trump is literally advertising for this Bible.
Truth.
And then there are Christians that are like, this is so good. And this was the points that David Wolf was making. I'll just read his tweet. I understand those who believe Trump is one of them. I get the perspective completely with the observed cabinet appointments, COVID pandemic, and Operation Warp Speed, with the obvious election interference and brazen corruption of the DCB system. Do you now feel it's possible that maybe, what if Trump just made poor cabinet choices, not realizing how corrupt the DC establishment really was? What if he got duped by the pandemic propaganda and thought it was a legit plague coming? What if Big Pharma and the dark side actors tricked Trump with the jab bioweapon rollout disguised as a vaccine? Many very smart people I know fell for the scam. Why not Trump? So now we have very intelligent people like falling for this dialectic. Okay, so we need to suspend and ignore reality.
Mm-hmm.
We need to suspend and ignore facts and what we know has happened. And we're going to make just gigantic excuses for this incredibly intelligent man that's a multi-billionaire. He didn't become a multi-billionaire because he was stupid, and he didn't just inherit all of it from his daddy. And his mentor was Roy Cohen, and that's a whole other show for a whole different day. And not only that, check this out. You know, he was all free speech and whatever, and he got kicked off and censored from all these platforms. Yet he refused to support a supposed free speech platform like Twitter or whatever the flavor of the month is, right? Rumble or whatever. But yet he's set to make $22 billion off of the sale of Truth Social. And so Truth is very lucrative for the Donald.
Mm.
And so David Wolf is kind of trying to postulate this idea. What if he really just did get tricked and this time it'll be better? This time it'll be better because he won't be tricked this time. What did George say?
Let's see here.
Fool me once, shame on you. Get fooled me, we can't get fooled again.
Exactly. So, maybe that's the case. I mean, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but it's these same type of mental gymnastics that is allowing the Zionist nation state of Israel to obliterate and eradicate women and children, 30,000, in the name of defending themselves. They've broken every conceivable treaty that has ever been made to establish peace. Conveniently, through the nuclear project, they have the nuclear bomb for some crazy reason, which I've still never been able to figure out. And governments are beasts, period. Whether it's, we're Americans, right? And we still, we slam our government and we point them out. And then, this is all the Biden regime. And, the reason there's hyperinflation is because of Joe Biden. It's Bidenomics, and the reason the FBI is bad is because of Joe Biden. The reason the CIA is bad is because of Joe Biden. But people forget, Oklahoma City, right? People forget Bill Cooper, right? Bill Cooper said, hey, CNN just waltzed into Osama bin Laden's cave and interviewed him. The FBI and the CIA have been looking for him for about a decade, and they have all these assets pointed at him, but they can't find him. CNN walks into his cave, interviews him, and then Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, they found him too, so that they could be weaponized extremists, right? And so be careful, because I don't know what Osama bin Laden's going to do, but it's going to be bad, and they're going to blame it on him. And then he references like maybe an attack on DC or whatever, which is literally pretty much, relatively speaking, exactly what happened. And that was completely facilitated by the FBI and the CIA, which in turn was known by the internal cabinet of the president. They get briefings. They know what's going on. They're not left in the dark. Iran Contra et al. And everything else. And it's just, it's so amazing and incredible to me to watch the mental gymnastics that people go through to try to make this stuff work. And they do it because they need a political messiah. And the thought of not having a choice is just a thought that they can't go to sleep with at night.
Sadly, I think it was Steve Quayle that said we're looking for political solutions to spiritual problems. Fundamentally, when we get down to it, and then when we do examine the spiritual issues, like you said a moment ago, when it's absolutely decimated by, and I think Wendy J pointed out, she said, I think the name you were looking for was Darby, John Nelson Darby.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So prior to that, the understanding of eschatology prior to that, I dare say 150, maybe 170 years ago, two things happened. And I've never publicly spoken about this before, but essentially two things happened in the United States of amnesia. Number one, critical thinking was extracted from the school. And what I mean by that, teaching grammar, logic, and rhetoric through the trivium and the quadrivium. That was why, and that is why, you can read letters home from the Civil War. And these guys use a level of prose and incredible speaking that we don't even understand today. They're fifth graders. Honestly, back then, they went to college to learn advanced Latin and mathematics. Today, we go to college to learn remedial English. So when we look at the times, there's two things that happened at exactly the same time, and nobody ever talks about it. Number one, the trivium, the one-room schoolhouse, was intentionally moved away, and compulsory education was brought in. And at exactly the same time, who else came on the scene? You mentioned him a little while ago. You know, it wasn't Darby. It was C.I. Schofield, who was bankrolled. If you go look into that guy, he was a complete charlatan, absolutely bankrolled by some very seedy interests that all of a sudden, prior to that time, there was never a commentator on the Bible that would have the audacity to put his notes in the same Bible. Up before C.I. Schofield, they would always take their notes and it would be an entirely different edition. They would never consider putting that along with the Holy Scripture. It was something you had to purchase in addition to that. So going back to the backdrop, when you start there, you know that the area in which you start, that this was manufactured. This is why this is generational evil in my mind. This is why there are puppeteers in, like Paul talked about, we're dealing with, you know, principalities in high places, that because it's the only thing that can explain how and why this stuff can last generationally. Where exactly 150 years ago, the fundamental means to educate a child in the United States was removed, extracted, and you can only find it, by the way, these days in Ivy League schools and prep schools. So, yeah, only the elite get that education, unless you want to teach yourself, as I had to do, and to teach my son as well. So, yeah, the trivium and the quadrivium was removed from schools, and in came this Darbyite pre-tribulation rapture. Now, I know I'm not going to win any friends on this, but look, I'm an American first. You know, I'm a soldier of Christ first, but then you get my point. I don't care that I'm going to lose. I understand that when we talk about these things, most people, when I've kind of brought them up before, whether in my podcast or otherwise, when I brought them up before, people are like, man, you're really going to get yourself in trouble for that. Do you think I care? Do you think I care? We are on the precipice of losing everything. And here we are. You know, what was it Mark Twain wrote? In the beginning of a change, a patriot is scorned and mocked. As his cause succeed, the timid join him, for then it costs nothing to be a patriot. Well, I'm not that sunshine patriot, and I know you guys aren't either. And I'm sorry if I'm getting a little bit irritated about this, but I'm so sick and tired of the cowardice of people that, you know, it sure is funny that we had Pharisees and Sadducees back in Jesus' day. We got the same thing now, except they're called Democrats and Republicans. And, and we could even use that in the evangelical arenas, where these same pro-life. Let me back up a little bit. I remember right after Bush got out of the White House and Obama came in, a strange thing happened in Kansas City. All of the anti-war left that were in all the corners downtown in the plaza in Kansas City, they disappeared when Barack Obama got in there. And then all of a sudden Trump comes back in and they're back on the same sidewalks. Well, I see the same thing with the people on the right. You're telling me you're for the sanctity of life, but did you know about, to my understanding, 30% of those people that are getting bombs dropped on them right over there right now, 30% of those people are evangelical Christians? Did you know that? That they've been in that area for generations. They know their great-great-great-great-grandfathers that have lived on that ground. They're being systematically murdered. And because, I'm a Republican, I'm going to turn my blind eye to this, but you're totally against abortion. Explain that. Yep. Look, I know I'm not going to win any fans on this, but man, it's time that we stand up and be men, be women, be the people we're supposed to be. And if you disagree on the basis of fact, not emotions, because everything you just said a moment ago and everything I just said is a fact. Look at the people who set that place up. Theodore Herzl. Most of these people were dyed-in-the-wool atheists. Yeah. They used the name and they still to this day. Oh my goodness. You know what, bro? I'm just going to hand it on back to you because I'm probably going to lose my mind if I keep going. But fundamentally, we keep looking. Let me just hit this one point, and I'm going to throw it back in your lap. I don't give Trump any quarter on this. I have a hard time believing that a farmer in North Carolina and a farmers in Texas can see beyond the truth on this, but you're telling me the president of the United States doesn't know what all these things are going to do. I don't need to be told John Bolton is a polecat. Everybody knew that. And you put this idiot in there and all these other people. That's why I'm saying Trump ain't your solution. The only solution, the only solace I get. You said a moment ago that you've been getting into the word a lot. And I'm telling you what, man, all day long, man, if I'm not studying it, I'm listening to it. Even when I'm out here working, I put away some of the podcasts that I typically listen to. And I'm trying and I'm looking. It's amazing how much overlap that you and I have in our lives. And that I'm sitting here looking. I'm like, okay, did I miss something? Could I be wrong? Is what happened in 70 AD, what Jesus was talking about in Matthew 24? I'm examining this for myself, and I'm now looking at it with different eyes, and I'm saying, how was I ever made to believe opposite? Because it's right there plain as day to me. And then all of a sudden, out of the woodwork, right on cue, here comes John Nelson Darby, then C.I. Schofield, bankrolled by some very, very wealthy interests. And then all of a sudden, everything that the Christian world, well, I'm only going to say this really applies mostly to people in the United States, because there's a lot of Christians throughout the world that don't buy this Darbyite stuff. Yeah, a lot of them out there. And here we are on the precipice of people literally saying, and I said this when it first came out in October, I said, sadly, now I'm probably going to, I don't know who's dropping off or who's coming on, but I made a prediction that if it comes down to it, if we don't wake up and smell the corruption before we fall asleep drinking the hemlock, we're literally going to see people probably right there where you are in Texas, and probably right where I am in North Carolina, where they're going to go over there. The sons, their daughters are going to be dead right there in the desert. And you're going to have American families bragging about the fact that their child died for this. So with that said, Matt, I got to ask, are you going to be raising your right hand anytime soon?
Matt's staying on the farm.
Yeah, I'm staying here. I'm not going to go over there and fight any banker wars anytime soon.
Thank you.
There's been so many people, even on the right, and they're like, oh yeah, my son or my daughter's going off to battle, and it's going over there to some foreign war that who in the world even knows what's going on over there, And you were telling me something about Ukraine and just how many people are just getting obliterated over there.
Yeah. And we just sent an additional 61 billion to the Ukraine, an additional 24 billion to the the Zionist nation state of Israel. And we can't pay our bills, and people are suffering here, and hyperinflation, and they can print money to do all that.
Oh yeah.
There's no need for us to pay taxes. If you can just print money and make your money problems go away, then buy your votes by paying all of our taxes and stop exporting death to the Ukraine and to Israel. And then you get all this insane support, and it's all predicated upon terrorism, right? And this whole terrorism thing started a long time ago by the Anglo-American establishment, right? And this became their modus operandi. And now you have this Judeo-Christian. Now, there's nothing American about the Anglo-American establishment, and there's nothing Judeo about Christianity, and you'll have all these guys like Ben Shapiro and our Judeo-Christian ethic. And that guy is the biggest Christ hater, and he hates Christians. And if you don't speak the talking points, he will absolutely hate you and accuse you of blood libel. Him and Dennis Prager, these bulwarks of right-wing American conservatism. But meanwhile, we have 60 some Congress critters that have dual citizenship with this nuclear power in the Middle East. And I would bet that more than 90% of those dual citizens are Democrats, ironically, by the way, but when they just went to refund this thing with Ukraine and Israel, a bunch of Republicans voted for it. And it's a dog and pony show. Trump was pro-life, but somehow Planned Parenthood still got fully funded, and the beat goes on. And we can supposedly give the rights back to the states, and we overturned Roe v. Wade, and let's celebrate. But the machine keeps the wheels keep getting greased.
They just keep on killing babies,
and the thing keeps going.
Much.
And it doesn't stop. It doesn't skip a beat. And it's just infuriating for Christian people to support these different things like, oh, we stand with Israel. You're standing with the eradication, besides the fact that love your enemies and do good to them that despitefully use you, and all of these things that are said in the New Testament, because these dispensationalists are so schizophrenic in their psychology and in their theology, it creates total cognitive dissonance where did you look, okay, Gideon, right? God comes to Gideon. God says, yo, Gideon, we're gonna, you know, kill the enemy, right? So Gideon rounds up a bunch of men. He's like, that's way too many. That's way too many.
I love that story.
Whoever bends over and laps up the water out of their hand, that's all I want you to take. That's 300 men. Everybody else go home. You know why? Because I want everybody to know that I did it. God said, I want everybody to know that I did it. You know, and then people want to compare Trump to Cyrus and all these things. And you had Nehemiah, who was called by God, right? And he said, and Cyrus facilitated Nehemiah going to rebuild the wall. But Nehemiah went and built the wall with a remnant, with a repentant remnant. And we have this whole reconstruction of supposed Israel with no repentance. This is a complete machination. This is a political machination that has been funded and facilitated by God-hating atheists and God-hating Jews. And this is my point to this political messiah. The current nation state of Israel, with all these rabbis and everything. And see, if you say these things out loud, you're anti-Semitic.
Yep.
If you point out reality and truth and what the Bible says and what the New Testament says, and you point out facts that are absolutely just undeniable, you're painted as anti-Semitic.
Yep.
Even though in 1901, the Oxford English Dictionary said anti-Semitism was anybody that was Semitic, which is Muslims and all the other terrorists, you know. And so then we painted all these Muslims as terrorists, but yet when they do their terrorism, it's like white guys with like Blackwater tattoos on their wrists with, you know, scarves on and stuff. And, you know, this is what makes this talking point about October 7th, like just terrible. Like, and here's the thing. Just like US citizens, like I'm not going to blame my neighbor for 9/11, right? I'm not going to blame my neighbor for the most recent air quotes mass shooting or anything like that, right? The citizens of Israel are political pawns. Like nobody is saying that the Jew, because there's this whole other weird faction that the Jews are what's wrong with the world, you know, and that's silly. I mean, and you know, we could get into all this Khazarian stuff and the Bolsheviks, and this thing goes really deep. But just because you point out the fact that the UN nation state of Israel and their beast system government is satanic to the core, and they do all the same satanic things that the US government does, that makes you anti-Semitic. Well, I'm not anti-American for pointing out what the CIA, the FBI, and the military industrial complex and what George Bush was just a pawn in all of that. Like it wasn't his idea. He's not that smart, y'all. But there's a reason why in scripture, every government is referenced as a beast, you know, every single one. And we need to chain the beast. The founding fathers saw this, and this is why they wanted these checks and balances. This is why they wanted different parts of government to check and balance, right? And somehow now we become this imperialistic president that through executive fiat, he can bequeath his tyranny on us all. And the only check and balance is this supposed Supreme Court that consists of Catholics and Kabbalistic Jews. And how does that even happen? Like, how is that even where's the diversity, equity, inclusion on the Supreme Court? We got a bunch of Kabbalistic Jews and a bunch of Catholics. Where's the representation of anyone? We need to get some purple-haired tranny on the Supreme Court.
Hey, don't say that too loud, bro. They're coming. But I'd made that same up until recently. There was not a single Protestant on the Supreme Court. And you're telling me, okay, this is actual representation. Let me back up if I can. First of all, I want to say, I want to give a shout out to all the people in the chat. If you would hit the thumbs up. I don't know if you got, I'm trying to highlight some of these comments because some of these people are dropping some serious landmines. And Andy says, hey guys, I could be going out on a limb here, but I think this video was demonetized right when it started. So,
Good one.
I mean, there's a lot of great comments in there. And frankly, I can't thank you folks enough for being as, like I said, not that it's going to make a whole lot of difference at this point, but if you would hit that thumbs up, because unless other people out there that may not know this information. Let me back up a little bit, bro, because I think you and I talked about it briefly last time we all saw each other at one of the last festivals. And that was this thing that supposedly this D-Day invasion that happened on the border of Israel, supposedly on October, was it 6th or 7th? I don't even know anymore.
Right in there somewhere.
Okay, somewhere in there, right? Now, let me just say this. Had this same thing happened in any other place on planet Earth, every human being alive would have called nonsense on the official story. Okay, so here's what they're telling us. You got a bunch of, it's almost laughable if it weren't so doggone tragic. You're telling me that these guys somehow got a bunch of hang gliders, like that's the most efficient way to get across the border. They're on hang gliders, and they're going to say, hey, Habib, hand me a bean burrito. I'm about to go over to Israel. So he flies up over there, hits the ground. He's just going to come out, straight up go Rambo on everybody in the crowd. Now, Israel is not that big a country, but you're going to tell me this was the biggest smoking gun that I can't even believe I have to argue with people like Dan Bongino, who I lost all respect for him just based on his position on this, because if you came from a security position or a military background like me, you know that a rapid deployment unit would be there in no time flat. But it took them 8 hours to show up. Now, let's just say for giggles, Billy, TD, and Matt decide we're going to go rob a liquor store. We ain't got nothing better to do. So we're going to go in there, kick the doors in, shoot the place up, get blazing drunk right there on the ground with no concern that the cops are ever going to show up. As impossible as that is as impossible as the official story, but you don't hear Pawn Vanity on Fox News talking about it. You don't hear Dan Bongino, all the other people that are definitely CIA. In fact, Hannity doesn't even mock. Look, Google Sean Hannity, CIA lapel pin. He doesn't even hide it. These people, ever since Operation Mockingbird, since 1953 under Alan Dulles, they've owned the media all that time. But you're never going to hear anybody ask any critical questions on, hold on, how did this even happen? You're telling me all these Palestinians just rolled across the gate, the most fortified border, which, by the way, most fortified borders on the planet up until this attack were Guantanamo Bay. Number 2, what was it? This thing's giving me a thumbs up on here. Guantanamo Bay, Area 51 and Israel. Most fortified borders on the planet, but you're going to tell me these people just showed up 8 hours unmolested. Nobody shows up. And then when we look at the footage that did happen, they're sitting here blowing away their own people. And this is 8 hours later. It is an impossibility. The official story is an impossibility. And then when they hit up Bibi Netanyahu, or should I call him the modern King Herod, when they get with him, he says, oh, we'll come back to it later on, y'all. Let's get the crisis over like they always do. Let's get the crisis over, and then we'll talk about it. Same kind of stuff they pulled after 9/11, where Building 7 fell, and they announced it. Jane Graham from the BBC announces it, hours and 45 minutes to an hour before it actually happened. Yep. Steel frame skyscrapers fall at free fall speed into their own footprint, but nothing to see here. And then you're going to tell me it's like there is no lie the American people cannot be made to believe at this point. The only cure, history proves, that the only cure of this level of depravity is the crucible of really hard times. And the only time I had to give away a $600 knife set because I got this wrong, there's only one time in history where anybody ever corrected themselves when they become this depraved, and that was Nineveh. And they still got dealt with later on. So the only thing that cures, I can't even talk common sense like this to most people, even military people. I'm like, hang on, you know as well as I do, a quick reaction force doesn't take 8 hours to mobilize. That alone is the smoking gun. And if that's proven to be a lie, then everything else is a lie.
And now we know that they had prior intel. So they had way more than 8 hours to respond. They had days, they had prior intel. They watched them practicing with the hand gliders. You can't make this stuff up, man. Hand gliders, first off, they could at least take some of our 11 billion a year in welfare and hook up these guys with some more sophisticated technology or something. They could have came in there's lots of different ways they could have done it, maybe where it would at least seem plausible. But the reason that they fly in like Snoopy on a hand glider is because to mock the sheeple people.
It really is.
It is to mock us.
It is.
You know, and if you're going to buy that,
it is.
Dude, that is the funniest thing I've heard. Now I'm seeing Woodstock in the side cart. Oh my goodness, man. I mean, I guess the only thing we can do with this, but if you prove that the initial thing is a lie, just like 9/11, nobody knew it at the time for the most part. I mean, later on, same with Oklahoma City. You know, those are places I knew where I was and what I was doing when those things happened. And this one here is similar in that I'm like, okay, this is a manufactured lie. You can, this is why I don't give Trump any quarter at all regarding any of his decisions. And this is why I think bringing him in is the old boss, just like that one rock band back in the day said, old boss, same as the new boss. I think we're being, imagine a pyramid. And it doesn't even matter. I can't even believe I just did that, dude.
You're not exposed, Billy. You exposed.
Imagine a pyramid. Let's do it like this. Yeah. It really doesn't even matter whether you're on the left or the right side of that pyramid. Guess where the top is? That top of that pyramid, no matter which side, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Democrat, Republic, Crip, I mean, it doesn't matter. You're still inching your way all the way to the top of that pyramid. And Donald Trump was bailed out by some of these same people. I mean, this dude is the biggest wolf in sheep's clothing. And I'm like, it doesn't even, okay, where was his pardon for all the Jan 6 people when he still had the ability to do it? None of them got pardoned, but I'm supposed to worry that they're talking about putting him in the clink. I don't think, look, nothing's going to happen. This is a much ado about nothing. But you did make a really, really profound point in the very beginning of this, is that when you look at both sides in this supposed conflict over there, giving each other's a heads up, it's like being in an MMA match. Hey, bro, watch out. I'm fixing to throw this high kick. You don't tell somebody this. If this was a real deal, I mean, this is all a manufactured everything to keep us on edge, because the number one weapon all of these Fabian socialists have is fear. The Hegelian dialectic is problem, reaction, solution. They've been using this. We know that they've been using it as far back as Alexander the Great. So let me break it down this way. Some people say thesis, antithesis, synthesis. But here it is. They create a problem. And this is for the people that don't know. The reaction almost all the time is fear. So problem, they create the problem. The reaction almost 100% of the time is fear. And then they come rolling in with the solution. Hey, see that little banana eating, bean farting dude in the Middle East? Yeah, we're going to take him out. He's responsible. We know you don't know him, but we're just going to go ahead and drop a couple of J-dams on him. Nobody's ever going to care about him. Well, you know what? They care. And we should care. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you know, murder is wrong. I don't care who's doing it. And I don't care who it's coming from.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's, I am not, it is appalling to me that anybody from any other country on this planet would have the audacity to walk in a House of Congress wearing a uniform of another country. That is, I don't care what it is. So what if there were 60 people that had dual citizenship with France? People would lose their ever-loving minds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's okay to do it with Israel. You tell me, it makes sense for, I want somebody who doesn't argue. I want with facts. I want somebody with facts to come to me and explain how that is okay. I mean, we are completely bought and paid for, up one side, down the other. Like you said a minute ago, I know people, I've known grandmas that are literally flipping coins to figure out whether or not they're going to take their necessary heart medication or whether or not they're going to eat for the day. But you got billions to send over to that bobblehead Zelensky, and you got to send it to the modern day King Herod over there. You got money for all these people, but not a single dime for all of our veterans out there suffering.
Yeah.
Not a single dime for all these people on fixed incomes that have, that have bled for this country in so many different ways. How about all the other people? We're paying taxes, which I know it's another show altogether, but after this year, I've made it my mission to do what all of these people, how do I say this? I know that I'm all over the place, but I got to say this. I'm making it my mission to not ever have to do that again. And I'm going to employ the very same things they do. Yeah. I made it a big mission of mine to employ the very same things they do to where they no longer steal my earnings. That is the definition of serfdom, when somebody can take your earnings. But I sit here and try to talk about taxes to people. Why are we paying them? They can inflate the money anyway. And then when they do steal my money
over there in Maui,
Yep.
that whole place caught on fire, and we're sending billions over there when we could actually be helping our own people out.
$700. That's what they gave them, Matt. Yep. $700 to the people in Maui. But meanwhile, there's people right there in New York City talking about all these. There was a guy went undercover. He spoke Spanish. He went in there, New York City. They gave this dude $10,000 and a $1,000 gift card on top of it. This is all our tax money. It's going to the feds and then gets drifted down to these places all throughout. So I'm like, why are we even paying taxes? Why are we doing this? So I'm making it my mission to do everything I possibly can to A, not going to jail, but B, doing the very same thing. Yeah, but there's ways to do it. But this is the stuff that Robert Kiyosaki talks about. We're not given this education. We didn't grow up in Ivy League schools. We got to go out there and learn it. You got to get in. The Bible says, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly divided the word of truth. You can overlay that with life in general. We can study. If I want to know how Bill Gates doesn't pay taxes, if I want to know how Hillary Clinton doesn't pay taxes, well, I need to study to show myself approved on that matter. So instead of them stealing my money and sending it off to murder other people, I'm figuring out, you know what? There's only 4 ways to spend money. Okay. Spending other people's money on other people, neither cost nor quality matter. Spending other people's money on yourself. Cost doesn't matter, but quality sure does when you got the boss's credit card. Then they're spending your money on other people. Cost matters, but quality less so because it's your money. But the best way to spend your money is the final quadrant. You spending your money on your interest where both cost and quality matter, which is exactly why I can rescue way more kids if I'm not giving away half of my money to who knows who so they can go murder some other people. I'm going to find out exactly what I got to do to get out of this system so I can rescue more kids that are caught up in the very trafficking that many of these people making our laws are almost certainly part of.
Yep.
And it's real interesting that you drew that pyramid and then you talked about taxes, because that pyramid you can find right on the back of the $1 bill. And that eye at the top of that pyramid, although a lot of kooky dispensationalist preachers and deceive people, they'll tell you that that's God, but that's the God of this world. That is Lucifer, and that's the all-seeing eye. And that is at the top of that pyramid, regardless of what side of the pyramid you're on, the left or the right. And you also, right after that, brought up January 6th. If you go back into our live streams, and we hover at 100,001 because we're heavily shadow banned, 2 because when you don't fit into a narrative in the dialectic, whether it's left or right, people just don't want to listen, so they
Mhm.
unsubscribe. But I remember saying in one of our live streams that, hey, this march on Washington, January 6th, is a total setup. So if you want to be set up, go. But
Yep.
I would avoid going because it just reeks like a setup. We
Yep.
already know that the CIA and the FBI have been weaponized, and it's one thing to point that out now, but it's
Sure.
another thing to know that it was happening and then participate in it. And then like, hey, some 60-year-old grandma that walks into the Capitol, I get it. She's a 60-year-old grandma or 70 and she's retired.
Mhm.
She doesn't even have time to pay attention to all that stuff. So I get it. I get plenty of people being there and being duped into it as pawns. But to act like the whole thing wasn't a setup is absurd. And now you got all these innocent people continuing to rot in jail.
Mm.
And with all this supposed Republican influence and with all this Donald Trump influence and everything,
Yep.
these people continue to rot.
Mm.
These people are continuing to rot. And it just shows me. And here, the another thing about Trump that they say, oh, they're attacking him and it's so terrible. Well, all this fundraising is paying all his legal bills, and his net worth continues to go up. He's going to make 22 billion from True Social. I'm waiting for even just financial. I'm waiting for him to take a hit somewhere, and now they'll float this stuff. Oh, he's going to get assassinated.
Mhm.
And then you got really smart people like Patrick Bet-David. This is what makes this whole thing really strange to me,
Hmm.
because I was listening to Patrick Bet-David and he starts spinning this tale about, the reason Trump will win this time is because he's an underdog, because, and he starts saying all this underdog stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute, what happened last election? I mean, Trump lost because he wasn't the underdog. Is that what happened? Oh, that's a new version of history that I'm unfamiliar with. And people will do the craziest mental gymnastics to make things work in their own mind. And as Christians, one, we must worship God in spirit and truth. And two, we must love our neighbor as ourselves. We need to love our enemy. We need to be kind to them. Nobody's saying don't defend yourself. Nobody's
Mhm.
saying don't defend your family.
Yep.
There are biblical mandates for the preservation of life.
Yep.
So not some like dope smoking pacifist or anything like that. But what I'm saying is everything that is going on in the Middle East has absolutely nothing to do with God. And anybody that thinks that there is going to be a third temple, okay, the only reason for a third temple would be to sacrifice. Every sacrifice would be an abomination to God. The Antichrist can't sit in the house of God and say that he is God when it's not God's house and God was never there, nor will he ever be there. And any type of sacrifice there would only be spitting in the face of Christ, who was the final sacrifice. And this was the point I was making. And this, all of this pre-trib dispensationalism, all this Darbyism, this is what has fed all of this Hebrew roots mania, right? Where people don't know how to say Jesus and they got to say Hayawashi and Hawushua and even Yeshua and John MacArthur and his Yeshua, all this Yahweh and all this stuff, right?
Mhm.
This is all from postmodern deconstructionism. This is exclusively from this Judeo-Christian idea and dispensationalism. Like, it has created, you have these messianic Christians. Paul was a Hebrew of the Hebrews, and Paul said, brethren, he constantly referred to, he explains that he was a Hebrew of the Hebrews, but he now associates with the church. He said, I persecuted and killed the church in the Jews' religion. He clearly defined that he was no longer a Jew. And who's a Jew? One outwardly or one inwardly? Not all Israel is of Israel, right? And what about that synagogue of Satan that say they're Jews and are not? How are we going to reconcile all these things, right? And then, we'll create this huge gap, space and time, and just like evolution, we'll shove everything under this magical carpet of 2,000 years, and then magically out the other side, these Jews, whatever that means, whoever they are, like, and however that is determined, even though the 144,000 were the first fruits, right? which the first is usually in the first and it's not at the end or the last. The first fruits is the first, and Christ was the first fruit. And then the 144,000 are first fruits. And here's another thing, dispensationalism, right? What did it create? Jehovah's Witness, Seventh-day Adventists, Mormonism, they all claimed that they were the 144,000, right? Because they chopped this thing up. They destroyed the historical view of eschatology that was the predominant view in the 1800s, and that was written predominantly in the 1800s. Why? There was no even concept, right, of the potential of a Jewish nation state prior to 1948, unless you were a banker atheist that was planning and plotting and setting up this whole thing. So they were dealing with but even people that don't prescribe to dispensational pre-tribulationism, they're still so heavily influenced that they'll get really confused about Israel. They'll get really confused about the Jews, and they make up all these different titles to hide it under. And we have all these boxes, because we're so fractured. We're so fractured that we can't listen to the discussion, right? We draw our presuppositional position. He's a covenant theologian, he believes replacement theology because he just said that, because of what the New Testament says, like not all of Israel is of Israel. And it wasn't seeds plural, it was seed singular. It was Christ. That promise, that son of David was Christ. He was the seed, right? That was in Jerusalem, right? We're looking for New Jerusalem. When all this stuff, there is stuff that's still going to happen in the future, right? And Israel, God is not finished with the Jews, and however you want to define that, that's a very long discussion in and of itself. And these people aren't automatically demonic because they're Jews, just like Muslims aren't automatically terrorists because they're Muslims, right? This is all the dialectic that creates this, we need to destroy Palestine because Hamas. So we're eradicating women and children in hospitals, because they hide under there. Yeah, cool story. That's why we blew up Iran and Iraq and Afghanistan. And what was the real story behind all of that? It was all a lie predicated by CNN when they were fair and balanced before they became the communist news network. So Operation Mockingbird has been going on for a long time. And to think that these other governments don't participate and facilitate in it. And then when you have our mainstream government, when you have the Republicans and the Democrats walking in lockstep on this thing, man, everybody, that's what they always, the solution is bipartisan. No, dude, that's a dumpster fire wrapped in a train wreck. Like, bipartisan agreement on anything is just as bad as the two opposing sides, because most of what's done is done in lockstep.
There's no, when you get down to brass tacks with all this, man, there's so many different ways we can go. But if we just go back, it was funny because one of the books I'm reading right now, it was recommended by Pastor Chuck Baldwin, and it was called The Destruction of Jerusalem. And it's by a contemporary of, I can't think of his name, but he lived around, this book was written in 1805, if I remember. Now, it was universally understood what he was writing in this book for that time. And he overlays what was written by Josephus and what was described by Christ in Matthew 24. And keep in mind, Josephus was taken captive by the Romans during the siege of Titus, and or Vespasian at first, and then Titus eventually. These are Roman emperors, obviously. Well, Titus was the son. Anyway, he was taken captive. They were smoking everybody. And if you read the words of Josephus, who actually witnessed what went down in 70 AD, it will absolutely floor you. In fact, all these contemporaries of that time said, just like Jesus said, there's not going to be a stone left on another. Man, they dug up the foundations, dude. This is it was like the worst military calamity in history. Never before. But then I'm still trying to find that place prior to 1948 where they all repented and then they were all brought back in the holy name, because that one just jumped over me, because every single time they started tripping back in the day, they didn't come back home until you did a major amount of repentance. So, that also brings me into what you were saying a moment ago, because for all of my life, up until recently, my Lord and Savior was known as Jesus. And now I'm hearing all these other things, and then people insisting that you say it that way. And then I respond with, hang on. So what do they call him in Mexico? What do they call him in Afghanistan? If there are any Christians over there, what is the name of Jesus in Korea? Because I guarantee you they're not saying Yeshua. Or what is his name in sub-Saharan Africa? So it's like this legalism that I don't understand. Well, I do understand. I know where, with study, I'm starting to realize, because it all came out of nowhere. And then I hear everybody saying it. Now, like I said, I don't care about winning fans at this point. I really don't care. All I know is that there is a group of people. Kanye West found out that you weren't at the top of the food chain the second you brought up Jews. You were made, inert. Same thing with Candace Owens, that she didn't even come out nearly as hard. Now, Kanye West ain't exactly, the dude ain't exactly a chairman to the court of St. James, if you know what I'm talking about. Not the most intelligent dude in the world, but at the end of the day, I mean, there's something that's so sacrosanct that you can't even whisper about it, and you can't even bring it up to a lot of people. And folks, I'm saying this from the position of a person that was fed all this same stuff, that I had to find out. And believe me, it was one of the hardest truths I've ever had to learn, is that everything I was told about the Bible, I just regurgitated a lot of what they heard. And I don't even think any of them asked any critical questions, because now that I see things with different eyes and I've examined it for myself, I'm like, how did I not see this before? This was plain as day. Don't ever call me Judeo-Christian. That's like oil and water. Has zero relationship to do with the other. And then also, I want somebody to explain to me, how does the Jewish religion of the Old Testament, how does it persist when you don't have a temple, when you can't do sacrifice? That religion was made extinct in 70 AD. Extinct. So that brings us back to so who are these practicing Jews today? Because I'd like to know what Judaism you're practicing. Oh, might it have something to do with the Talmud? Might it have something, that same Talmud that talks about my Lord and Savior burning in fiery excrement? That same Talmud that talks about the mother of my Lord and Savior hooking up with a guy named Pantera, who was a Roman soldier. Yeah, and this is even by Jewish sources that even cite this stuff. So folks, go look it up for yourself. You can find out. The bottom line in all this is, when I hear people like John Hagee, people like a complete fraud, I mean, to the point of idolatry, that the things that they say about Israel right now, he and his cronies and other people like him saying that they don't need a Messiah. Well, how many Jews are you sending to hell because you're telling them you don't need Jesus? So, I mean, I'm not going to change everybody's mind here, but I do know at the end of the day that this evangelical nonsense that I was taught my whole life, I'd say 99% of it is wrong. And most of the people professing it don't even know that it's wrong. So at the end of the day, if I got to say anything to anybody out there, I'm going to highly encourage you. Study to show yourself approved. Examine these things for yourself. Look at the contemporaries. I find it curious that Christians will immediately dismiss the Book of Enoch, even though it was referenced by Jude and I think Second Peter. They'll immediately snuff out the Book of Enoch, but you'll believe everything that comes out of the mouth of Josephus. So Josephus chronicles all of the stuff that happened in 70 AD, right in accordance with what Jesus said. Examine it for yourself and then find out that these people, a lot of people in the pulpits, a lot of them don't mean harm. They just don't know any better.
Yeah, and you make a lot of great points. And this speaks to government, okay, in general. the Jews said, "We have no king but Caesar." They said, "His blood be upon us and our children," right? And if you point that out, that's anti-Semitic. It says, a lot of people will twist that around and say the Romans killed Jesus, because if you say the Jews did it, it's, that's anti-Semitic. But if you read the story in context, the Jews and the Romans killed Jesus. Pilate could have exonerated Jesus. Pilate could have let Jesus walk.
Yep.
And the Jews said, "Nope, his blood be upon us, blame us for it." And Pilate's like, "Okay, I wash my hands."
Yep.
He played the great politician. He played the great
Mhm.
Donald Trump, and he killed the Messiah. And the Jews today, whoever they may be, whether it's from a nationalistic heritage standpoint, which we would never know because all the genealogies were destroyed in that same temple that was destroyed, where no brick was left upon another. That veil was rent in twain from top to bottom.
Let me
God
jump
said,
in for a second there. Let me jump in. There's even historical accounts that King Herod wiped out all of it prior. Even what he didn't wipe out was destroyed in 70 AD. The contemporaries of that time said Herod basically wiped out all the genealogical records before the siege even happened, long before. So whatever was left was decimated. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take you off your point, but I wanted to give you a shout out on that.
well, the point is God. And once again, God said, "Hey, watch this." And he rips this huge, thick veil from top to bottom, just in case, just so everybody understands what's going on and who's doing this.
Yep.
I'm going to rip this veil from top to bottom.
Mm.
And when I do that, you're not going to be able to sacrifice anything, and you're not going to have anywhere to sacrifice it. And this is the same case that I want to bring up to these people that are bewitched by all this Hebrew root stuff. Like when they participate in all these feast days and they keep God's commandments from the Old Testaments. I'm like, look, there's geographical restrictions on these things. There are sacrifices that required in coordination with all these things. And you're blaspheming God by doing this. You're blaspheming God by roasting a lamb and eating it. That was Christ. And he died once for all. And don't get sucked into all this revisionist history, all this dispensational gobbledygook, all this, this messianic Christianity. It's foolish. And, they're blowing shofars and wearing these weird robes and blue tassels and all this really stuff that were all types and shadows of Christ. And Christ has came and he has risen and he's on the throne and he's coming back.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be it's this invisible, there's not three comings. He's coming back one more time at the last trump, and maybe it won't be Donald Trump. I don't know. But at the last trump, Christ is coming back to rule and reign, to establish his kingdom. Unfortunately, Christ said, "My kingdom is not of this world, or else my children would fight." Well, so the Jews that are fighting aren't Christ, right? Because they're blowing up the Palestinians because God gave them the land. Which God? Which God? Like which God gave them the land that they're fighting for? And every time that God restored them back to the land, it was God did it. They didn't do it. And they didn't do it with the financial aid of the hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. welfare. And so this is all part of this beast system. These governments are working unilaterally hand in hand, and Iran's supposed to be this threat. Well, Iran just did this total puppet show missile firing thing. They're all working together. If you go over into Saudi Arabia and look at that NEOM project where China, Russia, Israel, the U.S., they're all funding billions of dollars into this NEOM project, right? And they're building this one world utopia over there. They're all in on it. The beasts are going to beast. The beast system are the governments of the world. Okay, God said, these are my people, right? The nation of Israel. Give us a king to rule over us. And God says to Samuel, "Hey, Samuel, give them a king." They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me. But here's what I want you to tell them. give them a king, and he's going to steal all their stuff. He's going to take all their wives. He's going to take all their horses. So that's what they're going to get. If they want a king, if I'm not good enough to rule over them, give them a king, you know? And now they got BB. And it's the same thing.
Oh, does that sound like a really awesome trade to you? Because when you get down to brass tacks and all this, look, I think I can kind of simplify at least my position on this. How is it? Okay. I know we have attention spans these days less than a goldfish. And actually that's a real study, where we really do have attention spans less than a goldfish. And I'm all present company excluded, including those in the chat and those that are listening right now. Think about this. If you think this whole thing isn't one giant parlor game, let me ask you something. How is it the sweet and sour sniffles was released onto the planet just a few years back? Everybody seems to have forgotten about it. And then total lockstep, every single world leader, notwithstanding the couple that were murdered that stood in opposition to it, jumped on board for the remedial action, which I'm going to have to speak a little bit phonetically here, or they will kick us off. So anyway, this little ink pen, we'll just say it goes, it stands for something else, and I'm just going to put it over here. The entire planet, for a sweet and sour sniffles that had a 99.9% recovery rate, the entire world leaders of the planet jumped on board for this.
Lockstep. Operation
Lockstep. All on board. So if anybody thinks that what's going on right now is any different than what happened in Europe back in the day when all of these monarchs, they were all related to one another, but they would say, hey, King George, hey, bro, I got too many people over here. They're tripping. Hey, what do you say we have a little bit of war? We trimmed some of this fat. They do the same exact thing now, except it's not regionalized in Europe. They now do it on the world. And we are, like Shakespeare said, the world is a stage and we're all mere players upon it. And here we are. That's why I'm saying, like the title of your show says, why do people need a political messiah? When you know that nearly every single, and I don't care if it's Putin, I don't care if it's Trump, I don't care, all of them are taking orders from some entity. I'll leave it to your imagination as to what that would likely be. But I'm not. So people are going to say, well, if not Trump, then who? None of the above. How about that? Let's put that on the ballot. How about, honestly, the only person that seems even halfway decent will probably never see the light of day, and that's Dr. Shiva. I like what he stands for in a lot of ways. There's things I don't necessarily agree with, but at least I know that he is not, I can't repeat what he says, but at least he's not on the wagon of all these people that are beholden to that country in the Middle East we were talking about. He's the only one I know that's running that isn't. Even Bobby Kennedy, they ask him about it. Oh, well, yeah, he starts stumbling over his words all of a sudden. Very articulate. You can call him lots of things, but inarticulate ain't one of them. So, but all of a sudden he became so when they started asking him about what's going on in the Middle East. Coming full circle with this, there are no political solutions to spiritual problems. We have a heart problem. And at the end of the day, most people would rather say, oh, I don't want to hurt my YouTube numbers. I don't want to say about this. I don't want to do whatever.
Yep.
At the end of the day, what good is that going to do you when you just sat here and everything just fell down around you? When we can see every single world leader is in lockstep, in with the same plan. They're all on the same program. It's just a bait and switch to make you think that you really do. They really do make you think you have a choice when really it's like the old analogy goes. Okay, you can have anything you want as long as it's hamburgers and fries. Okay, there's your two choices. Or you can wash your clothes with anything. You got Tide and Cheer. You can drink anything you want, Coke and Pepsi. They give you this dichotomy, this very narrow band of selections within your countries, making you think that it's making a difference when really at the end of the day, they're going to put in there whoever they want. They're going to pull the levers, and all of us that are willing to be spoon-fed knowledge will fall for it, hook, line, and sinker. And I'm not saying this on my high horse, y'all. I myself used to be one of the very worst of what I'm describing right now. But it wasn't without a great deal of study that I came to the conclusions that I now have, that nearly everything, the only thing I know I'm 100% sure about is Jesus is exactly who he said he was.
Amen, brother. And on that exact same note, there isn't a political solution, right? And this is why I think, just to bring it more into both of our channels, what drew us even to permaculture, what drew me to permaculture is, one, seeing the correlation between God's creation and man and that interaction producing abundance, which is a proof, in my opinion, as a Christian, it's a proof of God and that I am his creation and that we were created to work together to produce abundance. But it's just like Bill Mollison says, permaculture is sedition, right? Okay, we can't vote our way out of it, but there are lots of things we can do. Yeah,
Yep.
and obviously, preparing ourselves spiritually, studying, reading, worshiping God in spirit and in truth, and developing our relationship with him and our friends and family, and pointing our friends and family and acquaintances to Christ. That is, the chief aim of man is to honor and glorify God. And then when it comes to life and protecting and providing for your family, now you add permaculture and interdependence on your community, parallel society, parallel community, parallel economy, because that was the whole premise of the New Testament church. When Jews converted to Christianity, they were cast out. They lost all this terrestrial, right? They lost their land. This is what is so much more hilarious to these talking points and this Judeo-Christian stuff. When Jews ceased being Jews and became Christians and said, I identify with Christ, they were cast out, right? They lost their land and they were like, hey, I seek a heavenly country like Abraham. What does Hebrews say about Abraham? Abraham wasn't looking for the border of Israel. Abraham was seeking a better country by faith. We are all seeking a better country. New Jerusalem, that Jerusalem where everything's going to go down and everybody thinks it's all going to go down in the future, and it is New Jerusalem, y'all. It's not old Jerusalem. It's going to be burned up and bad, crazy, crazy stuff's going to happen. And they go burning a red heifer. It could happen sooner than later. And they go burning a red heifer. They want World War IV.
Yeah.
They burn they burn a red heifer. They want World War IV, and all these rabbis talk about it. They have it. They have them talking about it, and it's translated, and they can say, we can con all these retarded Christians into go along in this stupid game by all this dispensational stuff and the Temple Institute, and we're going to rebuild this third temple, and we're going to sacrifice all this stuff. Meanwhile, they're slicing chickens and swirling them around their head like a bunch of witches, because that's what they are. They hate God and they worship Satan, and they sling chickens around their heads because there's no temple, right? How do you like that? How do you like that as a substitute? Like bloodletting a chicken like a straight up witch because there's no temple. And I mean, there hasn't been a temple for an incredibly long time. There's a really good chance, unless we do want World War IV, that there won't even be a third temple. And we know from the New Testament that our body is a temple, and if there is, maybe he that sitteth in the temple of God, maybe it is. There's lots of speculation about genetic stuff and all this stuff, and that's a totally different direction, but it has nothing to do with some building in Jerusalem, in modern day Jerusalem.
Yeah, but I see that. I honestly see that as a political football that I don't see them just passing up. I wonder if they're going to wind up killing these red heifers. I think that's probably going to happen. And I think they're going to try to get the number one way that you can get 99% of America's evangelicals on board is to do that very thing. Just like they did with think about the devastation of the pre-tribulation rapture doctrine. By and large, most people like my own parents would say their reason for never standing up for anything So Jesus is coming back soon. How many, I kept hearing that over and over and over and over again, which was their excuse to never stand up and do anything. And we're supposed to occupy until he comes. And what are you? Okay, so I see an injustice over here. What? I'm not going to stand up for that injustice because Jesus is coming back. Well, when exactly is that? You don't know. I don't know. Nobody knows. But it just seemed when that came in, it created, I think, a fundamental laziness in most people, in the evangelical community, because now it just gives them license to not ever stand up for anything. When if you look, who were the people where was a shot heard around the world? Where was that at? And who was it with? There were Christians. It was a church congregation who stood against the British. I forget how many British there were, maybe hundreds, but just a handful of Minutemen that were out there. Where did they come from? I can't remember the name of the pastor right now. It's kind of embarrassing, but it was his congregation that stood up. It was Christians that stood up for the right thing. And now all of a sudden, we are the people that are most likely to acquiesce because Jesus is coming back, which is licensed to never do anything. So
they used the hymnal as wadding for their muskets. And Isaac Watts is a famous hymn writer. And he said, "Give them Watts, boys."
That's what I'm talking about. But who was it done by? It was done by Christians at the time. Who were the Black Robe Regiment? These were the people that were in the pulpits, because under the Johnson Amendment, you'll never hear most Christians in a 501c3 church even talk about many of these things. But under the Johnson Amendment, I mean, prior to that, basically a preacher could say anything in the pulpit. Well, during the American Revolution, the Black Robe Regiment were all of these. These were the guys who spurred it on, said, stand up, fight, do what's right. This is not Romans 13. We're going to interpret it the right way, not just hand over your stuff and give it all to the government. There's such thing as a just and an unjust law. There's such a thing as natural law. And these are the things that have been forgotten intentionally throughout our school systems. But, when you come full circle with this, you mentioned permaculture as a means, and somebody put it very beautifully in the chat. I think it's already gone by now, is that Bill Mollison can call it permaculture, but it's really a rediscovery of what God already, it's a renaissance almost of what God already put on the earth and how it ought to be done to where it can be a self-licking ice cream cone. That's what we seek to do in permaculture. And that's why I'm going through right now on my YouTube channel, if I still have one after this, I'm going through this composting thing. You want to get yourself with this boot from off your neck. Remember just a little while ago with the sweet and sour sniffles, you couldn't find nitrogen-based fertilizers anywhere? Well, it doesn't matter if you know how to compost correctly. And that's exactly why I'm saying these are the solutions. This weekend, the one hole I got in my game is knowing what to do with the pelt after I can butcher an animal. I can do anything I want with it, from being on 4 feet to being in that freezer. But one thing I've never known how to do is what to do with the hide, how to brain tan buckskin. I'm going to learn that this weekend. Okay, that's another little feather I put in my cap. And it's just like you were saying, like what you guys are doing and what I'm doing. It's a matter of, it makes you more difficult to kill, I guess, when you get down to brass tacks. Because if you can go out here, if, things were to go sideways enough, it's amazing how many people say, well, I'll just go hunting. And I always hear it from people that have never been hunting in their life. Or I'll go fishing. I'm like, okay, what do you catch it? These people have never been fishing in their lives. And you're just going to take up something that is in and of itself is kind of a difficult thing to do. Well, okay, let's say you did bag a deer. Now what do you do with it? So you have none of those skills. And I'm encouraging everybody, whether it's learning how to make your compost, learning how permaculture, it's really just another way. And like I said, I don't really have access to the chat so much right now, but if you can take these little things, and believe it or not, there's a whole lot that's right there in the Bible. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. There's so many farm overlays in the Bible, over even in 2 Kings. There's a reference to a swale. I kid you not. Somebody pointed it out to me once. Over and over and over again, there's all these examples on how we don't have to, where first of all, we rely on the Almighty first and foremost.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I know I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. But when you get down to brass tacks, he expects something out of us too. If you see all these things unfolding, if you know that they're happening, then it should be incumbent upon you. It should be your responsibility to evangelize not only the good word, the good news, the gospel, but also these other ways, these modalities in which we can feed ourselves and feed those around us who might just have to someday engage in the, I don't even want to say it out loud, to be honest with you, but sadly I think I see where it's going. And I think a lot of people out there see it as well. I'm just sick and tired. Historically, we know that people just don't wake up until things become impossible. Then all of a sudden you want to wake up. So I'm just hoping and I'm praying that as things get worse and worse, as this economy gets worse, the powers that shouldn't be know that you can subjugate any population by providing food, entertainment, and a reasonable expectation of security. If you lose two of those three, you got a revolution on your hands. That's what happened in the French Revolution. They've known this all the way back since Alexander the Great. Now, food in the United States of America. Okay, well, they make welfare just comfortable enough that you never really want to escape it. So, food, entertainment. Even the bums in Asheville got cell phones, so they got that covered. I'm sure they got Netflix subscriptions and a reasonable expectation of security. Well, we can see the food's starting to fall apart. The whole thing right now is falling apart. Entertainment, that's probably going to be there. And the reasonable expectation of security, that's probably on the way out too. So two of those three pillars are about to fall, and with it, probably the expectation of what we see every day in terms of what we consider to be normal life. But this is exactly why, going right back to permaculture and how it overlays with preparedness and how it overlays with even my faith. I don't see too much of a difference between them. I know how they can all overlay, because almost certainly somebody's going to write to me and say, Billy, why don't you stick to permaculture? Do you need to talk? I'm like, okay, you think I can chew? I can't. I need a planet. I can't have people lobbing nukes over here in my orchard. So I'm going to need a planet to farm. So I got to talk about these things, and I know you guys got to do the same as well.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's how our channel has kind of morphed as the boys have gotten bigger, and we've started lots of different projects and different business ventures. We love the community. We want to encourage people. We want to encourage people in the faith that was once delivered to the saints. We want to encourage people that they can do it. We moved from a neighborhood. We didn't ever grow anything. We didn't grow up with families that grew anything. Yeah, small gardens. I had never planted a seed in my life. And, we're like, hey, we want to live this slower, intentional lifestyle that's comprised of less stuff. We want to reject hyper consumerism. We want to reject this debt-based economy model. We want to get debt free. We want to invest in dirt, like dirt coin and food 401ks. Instead of investing in a synthetic stock market and infrastructure, we want to invest in real infrastructure and food forests and all these different things that will feed us generationally. And then we want to hone our skills, try, fail, adjust, hone your skill, plant it. Why did these 10 trees did great? That one tree died. Why did it die? And then you plant 10 more. And then maybe, none of them died this time. And you continue to get better and better. And then you can share that skill with others, and then they can stand on the shoulders of giants. Hey, I did this. Don't do that. That doesn't work in this zone, and we can work together to create this community, right? Even this virtual community that we're participating in right now. But we encourage you, speaking of real time community, May 4th, Saturday, May 4th, we're going to be meeting at Grumpy's Garden Club. I think we're teaming up with William. I think he's going to be there too, in Gladewater. So don't miss out on that. We're going to try to do a monthly meetup in real life. And this next month, Saturday, May 4th, it'll probably be from like 10 to 12. But we'll be putting more notices out there. But that's part of this community that we want to create in real life. and network together. It's
Yeah.
been neat selling our beef and getting to meet
Mhm.
people. And that's really cool, providing that product and service for them. And we kind of all mutually benefit from it. It's like what society is supposed to be about. It's real, it's tangible, it's nutritious.
Yep.
It's all the good things that you're supposed to be doing and participating in. And it's really neat that, okay, yeah, the sky's not always falling. We know there's crazy stuff going on in Ukraine and Israel, and I categorically reject all of it. And I don't think we should participate in any of it, period. End of discussion. And I mean, there's lots of secular people that don't even believe in God that think like that. And that's very common sense. I'm certainly not going to like scramble up some fake biblical reason for why somebody else should be, they want to outsource their crimes. I mean, I've heard of, I know of this pastor that went over to the Middle East and signed his name on a scud and said, well, before you blow up them Muslims, let them know that, that I signed off on the Scud missile. I mean, that's preposterous. That's just like, and and it just taints Christianity, and it hurts God, and it sickens God. And so we want to function and operate in spirit and in truth. We want to network and work with like-minded people that have our same core values and have the same message. We want to amplify that message as much as we can in this dome of suppression.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're not trying to foster to our YouTube algorithm and paycheck. So us boys, we saw that and we're like, well, they're going to try to shadow ban us. Well, you know what? You can't shadow ban my hard work ethic and getting out there in reality and starting up some businesses and start making some advertising and doing some stuff in the real world and actually helping real people. And guess what? I'm going to be able to still do the whole YouTube thing, podcast thing, and actually be able to preach truthful things that weren't, actually when they are relevant, not like 2 years later down the road when it's actually socially acceptable. Oh, now we can talk about it. I'm like, oh, great. You're telling us all this news that we already knew, and you're telling us 2-year-old news. Like, it's so stupid. I very much dislike channels like that. So yeah, I'm just I'm excited, and it's great to be able to be on here with Billy and talk to real people and have real discussions,
And Billy,
you guys just answered the question to all the people out there. Why do this? You just answered right there is the solution, folks. Create community wherever you can. Create your own businesses, your enclaves, where we do business with one another. It's funny how many overlaps we have, because I'm looking at starting up a community group of my own, because the ones that do exist currently are so far. I mean, they're like to the left of Rosie O'Donnell. And I'm like, okay, I know these kinds of people. They're going to have deep thoughts about everything in the world except for working and getting it done. So I'll tell you what, I'll start my own group, just like you guys are doing, and we'll have mutual exchange among ourselves. I've already kind of begun it a little bit, but I'll use whatever notoriety I can muster through here and use it to maybe put together something that's really worthwhile. So when they finally do shadow ban us or put us in the outer darkness here in the interweb or whatever the case may be,
permanently.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, these groups that we have in our own communities, we're worried about who the president of the United States is. Most of us don't even know who our town sheriff is. And that's who we really are. That's how we start this. But sadly, once again, it takes the crucible of hard times for people to do this stuff. I mean, think about this, bro. In the Great Depression, nobody ever talks about this, but 8 to 10 million people died during the Great Depression at a time in America where 90% lived rurally, 10% lived in the city. Now, 10% live in the country, 90% live in the city, and of the ones that live in the country, less than 1% are anywhere close to self-sufficient. Now, you had the same calamity unfold these days. If you lost 8 to 10 million people back at that time, when they still knew how to skin them. I mean, they almost eradicated entire species here in America going out hunting.
Mhm.
Now, that thing were to unfold today, the calamity would be so remarkable that it would just blow your mind. But the way to avoid all this is to do exactly what you guys are doing, creating community out there. And, you know, would it be helpful if, you know, some of these people share your faith? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, if you're growing eggs and I need them, well, maybe I could trade you for something. Maybe we trade silver. Maybe we trade whatever. Maybe we barter. I don't know what the deal is. But it's, instead of worrying about these political messiahs, I think we need to worry about building local, very, very local community of like-minded people that can be the modern day Minuteman if it should come to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. And these opportunities of exchange are opportunities maybe you don't see eye to eye on spiritual matters, but it's an opportunity to be salt and light in that exchange to where there's a possibility, like you at least get to talk to somebody else and present the gospel to them, you know, instead of like ordering everything from Amazon and picking it up in your mailbox. You know what I mean? It's like, so, oh, and one more thing I almost forgot. One of our sponsors, foodforestnursery.com. You can use the Texas Boys 10 for 10% off, but they're doing a 30% off sale right now. They sell bare root fruit trees, and the owner just emailed me earlier today, and I wanted to let everybody know that there's 30% off right now at foodforestnursery.com, and the Texas Boys 10 will get you an extra 10% off.
Whoa.
And yeah,
That's
Billy,
a
you got to
super
check
deal.
them out. They have very high quality bare root trees, and they're located right in Arkansas.
That's great.
Wow, that's better than some of the other tree people. I won't mention them right now, but they refuse to ever work with me because because of my political stance. They won't have anything to do with me. There's some seed companies too. They're like, nah, bro, we would really love to use that brown skin of yours and make us look highly woke. We really want to do that, but could you slow down on talking about being a Christian American, heterosexual, pro-gun, liberty-minded permaculture designer? We can't work with you, you arrogant black. Yeah. They're like, oh, dude, you got the right ta-ta, but the wrong ho-ho. We can't work with you, dude. You got to quit talking, man. Can you just sit there? You know, I'm like, well, so what are you looking for? You want like the guy on the Uncle Ben's box? I mean, what is that what you want out of it?
When are you going to write Billy's colloquialism? So you need to write a book, right, of Billyisms, and then give us the modern definition of some of these Billyisms. It would be, awesome. It would be sell like hotcakes. I'm telling you, man.
I don't know, man. I might work on something like that in the future. Really, what I want to do, what I've been trying to do, but I've been just so doggone busy lately, is I'm just using YouTube Shorts because, you know, YouTube is not promoting long form formats anymore. Yeah. Trying to use those shorts to try to put out pieces of information as best I can. You know, I was going to put out one today. I went to Walmart and I went to Walmart because if I didn't go around here, I would go. I went to Walmart and I'm like, I'm walking through there. All I need is an $8 thumb drive. And it's under lock and key. $8 thumb drive, right? It's under lock and key. On the next aisle over, guess what isn't under lock and key? All of the books. Not one single book. Everything, I'm talking an $8 thumb drive is under lock and key.
That's deep.
So, but all the books ain't. So what does that tell you? I mean, we know the price of everything and the value of nothing. So this is but also people like Matt, man, it gives me such joy when I see your kids, man, and my own, because it makes me realize that there is hope in this world because good night, man. I mean, you can go through, I would love to do a social experiment one of these days and just drop Matt off in the middle of Asheville. Just leave him there for like 3 or 4 hours, do a before and after IQ test. And then, because it doesn't work the other way, bro. Your intelligence doesn't drift off to the unintelligent. It goes the other way. Yours drops. So Yeah, but the point being is that, we get down to brass tacks with a lot of this stuff. If we really have got to create our own, there's got to be our own enclaves of doing business and everything it is we do.
Yeah.
That's the only way around it. And what you guys are doing there, would you like me to, I mean, if you want some, I'm sure a lot of the people that listen to me also, I'm sure if you want me to promote it, bro, let me know, because I'm trying to put together as many of these as I can. There's some young folks from South Carolina. They're putting on their own thing. I ran into them at another festival, and they're doing a thing just like you're talking about, but it's going to be in upstate South Carolina. And the idea being is for the same exact thing. They're like, okay, we're barely getting into this. We need a group of people that can be like the fingers of a hand.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And where I may be the first finger, somebody else might be the thumb, somebody else is the pinky, or, some grandma who feels like that she's not, that she would like to contribute in some kind of way. Well, maybe, you know what? I'm not going to say no to cookies. Maybe you can look after the kids. Maybe you can educate them the old way. Maybe there's all these other people who feel like they need a place in this thing, but they don't know where they fit. But that's how you find out, is in these groups. And it's so awesome you guys are doing that.
Yeah, we want to continue to build upon it and we want to do it once a month.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
funny enough, this was kind of my wife's idea, and she's always been more of
She's definitely an introvert.
Introverted homebody.
Yep.
So she's trying to stretch herself. She's reading lots of books, and we're all working on, being better at what we do and being more refined as children of God.
Yep.
Not just blaming our inconsistencies and our bad habits and our genealogy. I can't keep blaming everything on my dad. I got to take responsibility and work on it and get better at it. So that's what we're trying to do. And it's really neat and exciting. Like whether we met so many great people. Now, William bought all of our last batch of pigs, but with selling our pigs, we met a lot of great people.
Yeah.
And it's always in those interactive spaces, whether it's selling eggs or beef. And how neat is that is to be able to provide, how satisfying and fulfilling is being able to provide something that's high quality, what's in it, and you're providing to somebody that you've never met before. You're getting the opportunity to meet them, talk to them, and be part of their life. And I mean, this is really the way that life was intended to live. And it's part of that coming back to reality, right? And living a slower, more intentional, and I always mention hyper consumerism because I read The Millionaire Next Door many moons ago, probably 20 years ago. And that's what it was all about, hyper consumerism and rejecting that to be wealthy.
Yeah.
And
there was so many practical tips in that it just really impacted me. And that's why I always bring up hyper consumerism.
I got that book on the shelf down there too. I remember I read it like right after I read Robert Kiyosaki's first book. And you also take lessons out of that book that when you gather it up, if I remember, it's been many moons since I read that book, but I remember what everybody thinks a wealthy person is, that book goes to prove that you got your whole paradigm's messed up. It's not the person you think. And these people are hyper, frugal in many ways. And these people also have a good sense in the business that they do. Now, at the end of the day, these are people that everybody has this, oh, well, he's going to look like Thurston Howe on Gilligan's Island or something like that. And that's not what your average millionaire looks like. Doesn't look like me. It doesn't look like a number of other people out there. But when you get down to brass tacks, oh, forgive me for using that tax word again, the very thing I'm not going to pay again after this year. Yeah, but I'm going to get that all worked out, and I'll let everybody know how I did it, because that is my key thing right now. But one of the key things. But really, man, what you guys are trying to do down there, what you're doing is really the most fundamental. It's really the core of what these communities used to be. I'm only 53 years old, man. I saw remnants of this when I was a kid. People knew their neighbors. We still have milkmen where I grew up in Pennsylvania. We had a guy that would come by, literally put the milk in a little thing on the front porch. You knew everybody's name.
Mm.
And the only way to get around that is really, I think you got to hit this crucible of really hard times before people start saying, okay, yeah, let's have some mutual exchange. Let's have some mutual exchange. Let's have some, let's get back to all these things that made us great once upon a time, but it doesn't happen. And honestly, I can't find a single, in all the history books I'm aware of, I can't find anybody that's ever hit this level of depravity where we literally have to argue about somebody's, gender, whether or not that's even sane anymore. And the only way to do it is to find these enclaves of the willing. And honestly, anybody that's going to go to your group is either within the first few minutes is going to find out, okay, I'm in the right spot or I'm not. Now, I'm pretty sure it's not going to take them long to figure out, oh, well, yeah, my son is a transgender polar bear furry. What bathroom does he use? That's not going to happen at a gathering like that. We're literally going to find. Well, I doubt there's a whole lot of those people running around there anyway in that part of town. I saw a whole people at a barbecue joint here.
That's what's so funny about this furry thing. They're putting litter boxes in kids' bathrooms. I'm like, no, just let them go outside. Yeah. You let when my dog has to go, I open the door. You run out. You have to go on the front lawn. That's where you have to go.
Hey, bro, I'll tell you what I wanted to see. All of them, I wanted to see them. They're at a barbecue joint, and I'm like, I want to see them eat that barbecue chicken in that fur outfit because it's covering their face too. I'm like, I can't wait to see all that red sauce all over that costume they got on. Man, bro, I'm going to have to get bouncing here in a minute, but man, it's such a joy to hang out with you guys and talk about this stuff.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. I'm glad we could collaborate, put this together. We're busy like you are, man, and it's always fun to just get to link up and to hopefully cross-pollinate these channels. And hey, y'all, like, share, and subscribe. Check out the Fearless podcast. Check out the Pimpcast. Give us a 5-star review if you think it's worth it. And Billy encouraged us to start this whole podcasting gig, and we are indentured to you for that. We greatly appreciate it. And we want to work together. We're excited about networking with William as well. And it's just one big happy family. And it's a lot of fun. And that's why we do this. We don't do it for the ad revenue, right?
No.
Yeah. This is exactly that. But it is a good tool for us to be able to reach out to like-minded people and find that community in places you never thought, and you guys are, so heavily shadow banned at this point. I'm like, wow, it's really something else. But yeah, it's these enclaves that we got to build in private community, in our personal communities. That's really what we're encouraging here. And folks, like I always say on my podcast, the tagline to our show is stay alert, stay alive, because right now we're at a time where things can be very consequential. So do those things, learn another skill like I'm doing this weekend. Learn how to grow some perennials. Think about all those, like TD was talking about. Man, you guys would be crazy to not use that discount code at that tree place. Especially trees are the gifts that keep on giving. And so many people in the homestead and preparedness space, for some reason, forget all about perennial nut crop, fruit crops. I've never understood it. When you get those things, you get them off and running, and then next thing you know, it's feeding you for years and generations to come. So think about all those things, folks. And it's been a joy to be here. And thanks so much for having me, y'all. And thanks everybody in the chat.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and remember, y'all, stay fearless, my friends.